Hello, everybody. This is Agent Swarm speaking to you from Nice, France. It's a very warm and sunny day, and nothing to do with the weather. But today I want to talk to you about the Incipit to uh, Anti-OEDIPUS. I've got the French edition. I want to talk about the first paragraph and develop the main ideas of the book from that first paragraph. I'll I'll give, I know it's been translated into English, but sometimes I want to bring out other meanings than the official translators bring out, because there's always choices to be made. So I'll translate as I go along, and we'll see what sort of interpretation that I can give. My basic thesis is that Anti-OEDIPUS is a dialogical book. It's a book, I've never seen this said before. It's a book about dialogue. It's a book in dialogue with other disciplines, other books, other works, and other movements. And it's also, thirdly, a book of dialogical logic. It's a logic of dialogue. And we see that especially in the first chapter. And I'm going to try and show that dialogue, dialogical logic is already at work in the first chapter and in the first paragraph. And in more explicit form, it emerges out of that first paragraph. So we begin, and we must remember that Deleuze and Guattari say that we begin in the middle, and that could mean any number of things. But one of the things it means is that we begin in the middle of a dialogue. So in case we hadn't got it, there is a dialogue or an attempted dialogue, both real and attempted, with psychoanalysis, amongst other things. So it functions everywhere, sometimes without stopping, sometimes discontinuously. It breathes, it heats, it eats, it shits and it fucks. What a mistake to have ever said the it. So first, in German, the id is called das Es, the it. And in French, it's translated as the it, le ça. And in English, to make things look more scholarly, it was translated as the id. So we're talking about what in English has been called the id, and they're saying that there's not just one id or one it. There are many. There are multiplicity. There's an abundance, and the characteristic of these little its is that they're part of the subject of, I would say the dummy subject of an action or an activity. So we're already getting at the idea that the basis of the unconscious that they're trying to present is verbal, even if it's put in terms of what we can call the simple present tense with the value of generality. That's close to the idea that they'll give later to the notion of becoming as a sort of as close as we can get in a conjugated form to an unmarked form. We notice, so the message is first, pluralism, an ontological pluralism. It's all little its all over the place. And maybe that's all that we notice. We have to read the first chapter to see that the logic of the unconscious, which I'm calling as well the logic of dialogue, is based on three syntheses. Well, they say they're talking about three. They may be using more, but we'll take the three that they enumerate. There's the connective synthesis. This is connected with that, or it one is connected with it two, which is connected with or connects with it three, and so on. Not so sure if you can number the its. It might be like subatomic particles that you can't really distinguish one from another except by space, time, and function. But anyhow, it's a multiplicity. Whether it's a countable in the ordinary sense of countable or one or not is up for grabs. So we have the connective synthesis. The conjunction is and that's the principal conjunction of Deleuze and Guattari's ontology. And, which is et, pronounced a, is pronounced in French the same as is, which is est, pronounced a, the same pronunciation. But they're going to argue that and, which is the conjunction of connection, is prior to is. And my argument is that means that dialogue, a dialogical ontology, is, that's what the and amounts to, is prior to an ontology of being, which would be or tend to be monological ontology. So we have connective synthesis and. That's why I have all these little its all over the place, and we'll see that they connect. We have the conjunctive, the disjunctive synthesis, either or. Things are disjoined, but they argue that the good use of, so I would say the pluralist use for good, the good use of the disjunctive synthesis is the inclusive disjunction. We have either or in a non-inclusive sense. And thirdly, we have the connective synthesis. That's when, amongst all these connections and multiplicities and the bifurcations and choices we have introduced by the inclusive or, we say, that's it, that's me. And when we say that, we're in fact pluralizing ourselves. Of course, we say that's it, that's me, for in delirium, what they call delirium, for many things. That's why the leitmotif for the conjunctive synthesis is all the names of history are me. So once again, a plurality at the basis of the I this time, and not just of the it. So throughout the chapter, we have a move from it to I, and at the same time, reiterated move of pluralizing at each step on the way. So I would say that in a nutshell, in a slogan, the basic operations that they carrying out the maximum of action or of thought that they're proposing is connect, include, and conjoin. And notice I've broken up the inclusive disjunction. I've just put include. But that implies to connect that things are already disjoint, things are already separate, so disparate. So the inclusive or occurs twice in that list. The first time as presupposed from the beginning of the text. It functions everywhere all the time without pause. It breathes, it eats, it eats, and so on. And then later on, and we'll see an example of this in the first paragraph, when we're including as different equally possible terms the disjoint. So in fact, the full rule of method for thought would be disjoin, connect, include, and conjoin. So that's what we're getting here. We've got the explosion into fragments of the id into multiple ids. So we're studying from a disjunction. Everywhere there are machines, not at all metaphorically. I'll have to come back to that. One thing that they're very careful to underline, but without explaining at the beginning, is not at all metaphorically, as if it was obvious what that means, because we have to add not literally either, because we'll see that much of what they say there just can't be taken literally. So I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, I understand, not metaphorically. That's too much of a bad binary between literal and metaphorical, and that sort of makes it a more aesthetic or frivolous thing to say it's just metaphors. But we have to complete not literally. And at the end of the paragraph, they say something is produced, effects of machines, and not metaphors. So they continue. Okay, everywhere it's machines, not at all metaphorically, machines of machines with their couplings and their connections. So now we're getting into the connections. So disjunction and pluralization, connections. A machine organ is plugged into a machine source. One emits a flux and the other cuts it. The breast is a machine which produces milk, and the mouth machine plugged into that or coupled with it. So here we're still in dialogue with psychoanalysis. We can remember because it's the various its at work, and when we're specifying the its, they're machines. One it is a breast, another it is a mouth, and we'll go on from there. So we can think of chapter 3 of Alice in Wonderland, when the mouse is talking and saying it appeared or it happened, and the animal says, "What is it. You know what it is, and the animal says, "I know what it." What I mean when I say it, I mean usually a frog or a worm. So much for Alice in Wonderland. When a psychoanalyst in the discussion that we're beginning says it, so a post Freudian or neo-Freudian or not necessarily a Kleinian Freudian maybe or whatever. When they say it, they mean a breast or an anus or a mouth or sexual organ. So for the moment, they're going with that idea of it. Later, we'll see that it for them means partial objects, all sorts of partial objects, but it means partial objects insofar as they're parts, functioning parts in a machine. So it, as we see from the functioning that is emphasized from the beginning, when we say it, we mean a machine part that functions, and the main functions that they're talking about there, aside from connection, is coupling, emitting a flux, and cutting a flux. So cutting can mean cutting off or can mean intercepting, that is to say, receiving a flux without re-emitting it, or that's optional, re-emitting it again or re-emitting something else as a consequence of receiving the flux to connect up with another it. It goes on, the mouth of the anorexic hesitates between an eating machine, an anal machine, a speaking machine, a breathing machine, and in brackets, crisis of asthma attack. So here we're in the second synthesis. They haven't given the names to that yet. That will be the three succeeding parts of the first chapter. But we're in the inclusive or the disjunctive synthesis. The mouth of the anorexic is no longer just what it was in the first logical step, connecting machine to connect up with the breast and to intercept the flow of milk. Now we're at a high level of complexity and of disjunction, and I would say we're at a higher level of noetization. It's not just automatic. There is a hesitation, which is a noetic hesitation. So it hesitates between being the mouth of the anorexic, hesitates between being an eating machine, speaking machine, a breathing machine. And if they mention the asthma attack, it's because of all these different possibilities. It's no longer obvious. A connection can fail or not, but here we can have even more possibility for error and breakdown. Thus, we are all bricoleurs. We're all tinkerers, maybe is one way of translating bricoleur, each with their little machines. So the little machines are the ones in the exterior that we work on and tinker with. in all sorts of senses of machine, and the machines that are part of us, part of our body, part of our mind, part of our soul as well. Because they are talking about, the title of chapter 1 is Desiring Machines. So what are desiring machines? It's a paradoxical title, and I'll just throw it out now. Maybe I'll get time to discuss it. I think desiring machines are souls or psyches. So desire is the wrong word. It's a big mistake. They'll move on to assemblage in 1,000 plateaus, and even that will not be such a big concept in what is philosophy. Desire drops out in most of what is philosophy as a key term. And if we're trying to look at the relevance of Deleuze and Guattari in dialogue with today, I don't think the dialogue with the neo-Lacanian push set up by the Zizekian Lacanians is the right place to look. I think that's, despite lots of interesting things, I think it's a rearguard action, and it's keeping desire alive. Is a throwback to a time when that was a really key term for psychic and political struggle. I think the key term today is psyche, soul, and the key dialogical partner, rather than Zizek and the Zizekians, is James Hillman and the Hillmanians. But once again, that's a topic for a later time. So we're tinkerers, and we're tinkerers of the soul. I mean, on the extended mind, the extended soul hypothesis, the soul is all about us, inside us, including physically and out there in the world. So don't think I'm being a dualist or anything. An organ machine for an energy machine, always fluxes and cuts. So this is important. They've said fluxes and cuts and fluxes. There's a flux and then it's cut. So all this talk that Deleuze and Guattari are lava lampy, they're just pure fluidity or pure Heraclitean flux is illiterate. From the very beginning, they're talking about fluxes and cuts, and they're saying that that's an important part of what they mean by connection. You can't just connect to objects without any flux. That really would be a case of objects withdraw. But this is the opposite of objects withdraw, because if objects withdraw, we wouldn't know anything about them. We couldn't do anything with them, and all would be illusion. So we're not getting withdrawal, we're getting connection. Okay, now we're going up a notch in noetization. President Schreiber has sunbeams in his arse, solar anus, and be sure it works. President Schreiber feels something, produces something, and can produce the theory of it. So here we're getting the eye. President Schreiber says, I am the choice of God, and I receive sunbeams in my house to give birth to something new. So we've gone from it to implicitly, even though they don't pronounce the word as yet, to implicitly I. Schreber has written a book in his own name explaining his paranoia and his delirium, and not just describing it, giving the theory of it, and so owning it, enjoying it. Something is produced, machine effects and not metaphors. So we come back to this thing that's very important because they've talked about it twice, that we're not talking about metaphors. In fact, for them, we're talking about intensities. And I would add, we must not forget that all this is not a direct consequence, because there's been a qualitative leap and a conceptual breakthrough and a paradigm change and so on. But all this is in relation to the previous book by Deleuze, which is Logic of Sense, where sense is that sort of unstable thing that produces changes in signification. So it doesn't maintain the binary oppositions between literal and metaphorical. It makes them out of date as it moves, or uncertain, which is the metaphor, which is the literal, how many metaphors, how many literalities can we have. It's all on a sort of ladder or cone of sense or meaning. So it's machines, and which will later be called assemblages, and it's not metaphors. So that's as far as I want to go in this first episode. I don't want to go on in very long videos. So I'm going to call this Incipit A. And I hope to have shown that the logic that is expounded in the first chapter is already present in this first paragraph. And it remains to be shown, although I think it's pretty obvious, that this is a dialogical logic. People don't really realize that Deleuze alone and Deleuze and Guattari talk a lot about dialogue in various ways. And most people remember the sentences where Deleuze or Deleuze and Guattari say, if somebody says, let's discuss a little, the philosopher just runs away. There are other passages where they talk about the importance of dialogue and the importance of talking between friends. Deleuze has written with Claire Parnet a book called Dialogues. We see on the front cover the names of Deleuze and Guattari. So I think they were talking to each other, and they thought that it was important, their meeting and talking to each other. We see after capitalism and schizophrenia, so we have the and that I talked about. So it's a connection, a real connection, and at the same time, a real dialogue and a failed dialogue between capitalism and schizophrenia. And then we have the anti-Oedipus. So Deleuze supposedly is against negativity. So we've got the word against. Is negative about negativity, are we going to say? He's against unproductive negativity. So Anti-Oedipus is the sign from the title that the book is in dialogue with psychoanalysis, amongst other things, and against is a sort of ambiguous word. Everyone knows against is as opposed to, and against is up against. And the two senses go together in the idea of a dialogue which can be with a friend or an enemy, or as Deleuze and Guattari tell us in What is Philosophy, something else. It's sort of a friend, but it's sort of an enemy, something or someone that we have to dialogue with, but we have to mistrust at the same time. So that whole set of parameters of a pluralist dialogue that operates with the connective, non-totalizing synthesis with and, the inclusive disjunctive synthesis with or, and the micro or molecular conjunctive synthesis with that's me. I speak in my own name as this assemblage of partial objects is the logic of dialogue, including dialogue with the unconscious and dialogue with theories of the unconscious and dialogue with other philosophies. So I'll try and get a second part up as soon as possible, probably tomorrow.